Thompson Productions.
It was a layered operation that achieved many objectives, but it facilitated the growth of the state as well. And it facilitated that path of the dystopian nightmare, and the violation of our inherent rights. So that was an inherent example of the federal government's abuse of power.
Oh, Father, tell me, do we get what we deserve? Oh, we get what we deserve.
Holy cow. About a third of the building has been blown away.
And way down we go. Oh, way down we go. Say way down we go. And way down we go. Way down we go. Oh, 'cause they will run you down to the dark. Yes, then they will run you down till you fall. Oh, and they will run you down till you go. Yeah, till you can't crawl no more.
Hey, what's up, guys? It's Jose. I'm back with you again. We're on to part 3 of deep diving Dr. Painting's new research. We're about to get into it. Before we get into the main body of the thread today, which I'm not sure if we'll get through. There's for some reason I'm not entirely sure, which maybe it'll become more clear as we get through. She divvied up the next two into 3A and 3B for some reason. So I don't know. We'll see. I think we'll at least do 3A. We'll see if we get 3B and maybe just get both 3 in part 3 just to make it easier to make sense. Or maybe I can number these later as 3A and 3B or something. I don't know. Whatever makes the most sense, or we'll just kind of go 3-4 and just kind of have to figure as we go. But either way, whatever, we're gonna get into it. Before we get into the main thread, I did want to take a moment to kind of step back and recontextualize a few things. And I think a good way to do that with a good thing to do that with is actually another thread, which Wendy actually put together. And this kind of goes into kind of her series of caveats and context that she would like to provide that she intended on providing before kind of going into it. Obviously, we're 2 parts in, but we can back up a little bit now and kind of rehash some of this stuff. And it also kind of this master thread that I'm showing you now also does recap some of these. So I think I'm going to start using these as a recap for after the episodes as well. So I figured we'd take this opportunity to just kind of, go through this real quick, then also kind of, and then kind of go through over the recap the last couple episodes at least. So this is from Wendy. It says, for a few weeks now, I've been posting parts of an ongoing thread series, the main points of which I will recap in a moment. But first, a disclaimer. The series is not intended to be my complete or finalized writing about the topics covered in it, all of which are fleshed out in much greater detail in my second book, which will contain proper citations for the source material used to construct these narratives. Nor is this a series of representation of the full scope of topics covered in my second book. Rather, it is just a small and much abbreviated window into and a preliminary workshopping of some of them. This thread series is meant to introduce certain claims, events, and individuals, and begins to reveal the contours of a broader, often hidden network that McVeigh was not only embedded and plugged into, but that comes to bear on the nuts and bolts of the Oklahoma City bombing conspiracy itself. It is also a way for me to organize or reorganize some of my narration of these linkages and share some of my newer post-aberration material with you. Finally, and to a lesser extent, it is an attempt on my part to get ahead of some of the continued leaking of my work and additionally newly discovered instances of the same by an individual whose outbursts and actions have put me, my sources, and others in danger. While I intend to wrap up this series in the coming weeks, time, health, and other constraints and obligations that have arisen prevent me from including as much detail and information as I'd have liked. That said, some of the threads have been quite lengthy, containing a wealth of previously unpublished information and the contextualizing of other already known information in new ways. What may seem like simply a compilation of random details at this point is not, something I intend to demonstrate in part by the end of this thread series and more fully in long form writing a book too. Sorry, I kind of threw my what's the word I'm looking for? My cadence there threw off. Probably confusing. I read that odd, so it probably made it give you a weird impression of what I meant. The point there just being that, as I mentioned, I think in the last thread a little bit, that some of these may seem kind of disparate, some of this information in these different threads as we go through, but as we go along, they will, I think they're going to start to come together is kind of the point here, which is a note Wendy actually, I think, told me in our DMs when we talked before. So, but below is an abbreviated recap of what has been covered thus far in the thread series and links to the parts. So a preliminary thread, not technically part of the series, but that was initially intended to be and is very much related, can be found here. Now I read this as an interesting thread. I didn't really feel like the need to include that in this series, but it is an interesting thread if you do want to dig a little bit deeper. Some interesting information for fellow OKC heads of there. So I do recommend it. Go check it out. You go check. Hey, something for you guys to go look into on your own. Go check out this thread. This is kind of, as she said, you can almost view this as a preliminary thread that loosely ties into some of this stuff and has some interesting information there that I haven't really seen covered much elsewhere. So it's pretty interesting stuff. Part 1 of this series, which obviously we've already covered, discussed previously unreported claims of Richard Van Hazel, convicted and sentenced to prison as part of the committee of the state's conspiracy, and was also a key member of the Arizona Patriots and a close associate of the Reverend Jack Oliphant. The arrest and conviction of Van Hazel, Oliphant, and others resulted from Operation Clean Sweep, precursor to PATCON, and other similar multi-agency nationwide investigations into the activities of the extreme right. Van Hazel claimed that McVeigh was involved with Jack Oliphant and other remnants of the 1980s era Arizona Patriots who were still active in the 1990s. Van Hazel claimed that McVeigh had attended 2 paramilitary training sites, one in Texas and another Arizona, along with other members of the underground right, and the actual plot to bomb the Murrah was first hatched at the Texas site in 92. While Van Hazel claimed not only that he knew McVeigh, but that he was with him when McVeigh called a white power movement organization to discuss the logistics of renting a moving truck. Part 1 also briefly detailed the statements of Robert Millar, head of Elohim City, and Dennis Mahon, who each independently corroborated aspects of Van Hazel's claims. Finally, Part 1 touched on the statements of the spooky JR, an unindicted member of the COS conspiracy and close associate of Oliphant and others, and who prior to the Oklahoma City bombing made a curious statement about an undercover FBI and clean sweep named Robert Jacks, which these are my words now. Perceptive listeners who paid attention to my OKC series will remember Robert Jackson as a key important figure. So I'm sure that'll probably come back up in maybe future threads. But let's keep going. And she provides a link to Part 1. And now let's go on to a recap of Part 2. That was last week's episode, and then we'll roll into the body of today. And then we won't do this again, other than to I think we'll provide a recap at maybe the end of the episode, or maybe a recap at the beginning of next episode. Let's go ahead and get into the recap of Part 2. It briefly discussed a similar claim made years later by PATCON informant John Matthews, and knowledge of this by his FBI handler Don Jarrett. It looked at the links that paramilitary training activity in Texas Aryan nations and individuals closely associated with Aryan nations, some who helped harbor and at the time fugitive Branch Davidian, who himself wittingly or otherwise had dealings with a network of international arms dealers closely associated with Roger Moore. It was also noted the fact that both Elohim City and Dennis Mahon had ties to individuals in Arizona. Now she provides a link to Part 2 there, so he's also in this thread. So if any of you guys want these links to this thread, hit me up on Twitter at TireGangJose. I can send these links over to you, particularly this master thread, because then you can find all the rest. But let's go ahead and get into Part 3A, The One-Armed Man in Kingman. All right. Now this is showing first off the bat, showing a letter that is to Timothy. It says, "Dear Timothy," from a Jack and Margot Oliphant, who that is super significant. It says, "It is strange how fate crossed our paths. A box at the mailroom. We've had our own since '86. The feds tried to make a case. We understand your turmoil and frustration. Just went through something in 1986. A little bit chicken scratch. Sorry. I wish it were possible at this time to be able to write to you, but it is impossible. Fortunately, Richard found us this week, so we can at least say hi. Hang in there. Keep your eyes on Yahweh, God, and not your fellow man. You have many friends you will never meet on this side of the veil that are praying for you and know the spot you're in. We pray for your strength and faith and well-being. Prayerfully, we will meet someday. Prayerfully? Okay, that's a word. Yahweh, God bless you. Something, Jack and Margot Oliphant. Okay, so it's obviously it's a letter to Tim. That's her opener here. Let's go ahead and get into it. Our story follows Timothy McVeigh's fateful attendance at a Tulsa gun show in early spring '93, where, while manning Roger Moore's table, he met Dennis Mahon, Andy Strassmeyer, and another white Okie. Afterward, he headed to Kingman, Arizona, where he lived until late September 1993. But first, a brief detour, which I'm sure you haven't come to expect from me by now. Richard Van Hazel claimed, among other things, that McVeigh knew and was involved with Jack Oliphant and other members of the Arizona Patriots and attended 2 paramilitary training sites. Oliphant and the Arizona Patriots surfaced in news reports within days of the Oklahoma City bombing. The reports noted the long history of extremist paramilitary activity in Arizona and some of the groups who'd operated there, explicitly mentioning the AP's connections to the Committee of the States and Aryan Nations. Included here is a article from a Richard Robertson saying Arizona's history is training ground for militia movement. Does it have a date here? Nope, no date, but it says Arizona has long been a training ground for the fast-growing militia movement. The Arizona Patriots, a forerunner of today's militias, had members who were involved with a number of government protest groups in the 1980s. 3 Patriots went to prison and 2 others were placed on probation in 1987 for planning to rob an armored car. They planned to use the money to finance a 320-acre paramilitary training camp near Kingman. Authorities allege that the Patriots intended to eventually overthrow the government. Among other things, they plotted to bomb Arizona dams, power plants, Internal Revenue Service offices, synagogues, and abortion clinics, authorities claimed. Imprisoned were Jack Maxwell Oliphant, Daniel Taylor Arthur, and Monte Dayton Ross. FBI surveillance tapes of Arizona Patriots meetings in 1985 include the voices of former television actor Ty Hardin, best known for his role of Bronco Lane in the late 1950s series Bronco, and Gerald Jack McLam, a former Phoenix police sergeant. Neither was accused of misconduct, however. McLam, a highly decorated officer, is active in the militia movement and hosts a shortwave radio talk show with William Cooper, who publishes a newspaper for the militia movement from his home in St. John's. McLam, who founded Police Against the New World Order, often appears with former Arizona Governor Evan Meacham and Graham County Sheriff Richard Mack, who has attracted national attention for his resistance to the Brady gun control law. McLam also is a business associate of James Bo Gritz, a 92 presidential candidate of the Populist Party and a decorated ex-Green Beret lieutenant colonel. The 2 attempted to negotiate the surrender of Randy Weaver, a white separatist during a standoff in Idaho with the U.S. authorities in '92. Weaver's wife and son were shot to death during the standoff. 2 Arizona Patriots were trained at Oliphant's primitive camp near Kingman later were involved in the slaying of a Phoenix motorist during a traffic dispute. They claimed self-defense and were acquitted. 2 others were arrested in Denver trying to sell the Uzi machine gun. Documents show that several of the Arizona Patriots also had connections to the Committee of the States militia members who were indicted in Las Vegas in the 1986 murder plot against IRS officials. Among the signatories on a committee of states charter was Richard Butler, who created an Aryan Nations encampment in northern Idaho. Another was the Reverend William Potter Gale, a former Army colonel who was also a founder of the identity movement in the Posse Comitatus, which recognizes white separatism and acknowledges no government authority beyond the county level. Gale was arrested in October 1986 in Northern California, another paramilitary training camp where unorganized militia members were learning ambush and garroting techniques, part of the conspiracy for which Gale was charged, including indicting government officials and sentencing them to death. A loosely organized Arizona group known as the Freemen refuses to pay taxes, get driver's license, auto insurance, or license plates. Instead, they craft their own license plates, which read Free Man. The group got the attention of law enforcement authorities in 1984 after filing documents that created the Committee of the State of Arizona, assembled and threatened the death penalty to anyone who attempted to interfere with their activities. They never made any overt attempt to carry out the threat. In 1989, members renounced their U.S. citizenship, held their own constitutional convention, and appointed themselves to various posts to govern the Republic of Arizona. David and Donald Clark, father and son Freeman, who operate a North Phoenix auto repair shop, were jailed in 1988 after violating Phoenix zoning ordinances. Clark Allen Kepler, a relative, filed liens on the personal property of a number of public officials for which he went to prison. All right, let's keep it moving. By April 21st, the FBI had documented preliminary investigation leads relating to Oliphant and the Arizona Patriots, but that did not directly name either. By the last week of April, they were at least receiving, if not thoroughly investigating leads, specifically naming one or the other. When they did catch up to him, Oliphant told agents he'd popped into the FBI office on April 24th to be interviewed after hearing the FBI was looking for him. It is unknown if Oliphant's pop into the FBI headquarters was logged or documented. On the case was PATCON handler Don Jared, who along with two FBI pilots located and took a series of aerial photos of Oliphant's extremely remote and hard to access property in the Hualapai Mountains on April 27th, 1995. Here's more photos of the ranch. So they took aerial photos of Oliphant's property in the mountains. So here is some photos of it. It's a kind of, semi-expansive campsite. Looks fairly, a few different little outposts there, it looks like. All right. Sorry, scroll out of this. All right, more photos of it. Jared, accompanied by another agent, conducted the first interview of Oliphant the following day after waylaying him coming out of the mailroom where he rented a post office box. Oliphant denied. Here's a photo of Oliphant. He didn't know McVeigh or Nichols. He wasn't doing any militia or bomb training on his property. He did receive literature on occasion from various groups, but it didn't belong to any militia or a white supremacist group, nor did he want to get involved with one. Although he had contact with some skinheads in the past, he'd only been trying to help them straighten up and fly right. When various skinheads came to his ranch to work, he'd teach them how not to be so radical, which was pretty nice of him if you think about it. He wasn't a white supremacist, but he was a separatist along the same lines as Louis Farrakhan. He mostly just wanted to be left alone. He was very cordial to the agents, and the exchange ended on a pleasant note. As he was walking away, however, one of the agents had a Columbo moment and asked him why he no longer had his right arm. Years later, in a 2013 email to his former PATCON informant John Matthews, Jared said that while he no longer remembered many names, he did recall that one-armed man in Kingman was named Jack Oliphant. So here is a email from Don Jarrett to John Matthews. It says, "John, good to hear from you as always. Yeah, it has been almost 2 years of the story at the end of the year. I know things take a long time, but we'll have to have a long talk with Ross when I return in June so we can figure out our next move. Anyway, you reviewing your disc allows you to think of more things about our work together than I have thought about. Every time you remind me of something I had totally forgotten about. Your recollection about what you did and what we did is a lot better than mine. Right now, I don't recall any more names. I do recall that the one-armed man in Kingman was named Jack Oliphant. Once I return and we sat down and begin to thoroughly go over our work and I can concentrate, I think more things will come back to me. I will be back in the States around June 19th or 20th. I'm looking forward to seeing you this year and getting this project off the ground running. Keep me posted if you hear from Ross on 22 May. Thanks. Obviously, Don Jarrett being John Matthews' PATCON handler here. Let's keep going. Jarrett also conducted a handful of follow-up interviews with Oliphant after this initial one. McVeigh's defense team, the Jones team, conducted their own investigation in Arizona and surrounding states, which is a story unto itself. Much later in the game, Nichols' defense team conducted their own later, but by then, they were mainly picking up the trail left behind by the Jones team. Nothing came of either investigation, and the issues and information that surfaced fell by the wayside for various reasons. In some ways, I get it because the West Coast angle, as I call it, is highly complex and requires a deep understanding of the players and organizations involved, as well as their networks and methods of communication. It also requires inside sources. It's probably too complex for a legal defense, although that didn't stop the Jones team from pursuing some other, even more labyrinthine avenues of investigation. Defense investigator Richard Reyna gave it a laudable try, but was stymied both internally by the Jones team itself, as well as by his working partnership with J.D. Cash and the methods they employed. In an 8-page letter to lead attorney Stephen Jones, written upon his severance from the team, Reyna summarized some of his investigatory sabotage, again, a story unto itself, which it is. I have read a ton in many different books, but all the craziness of the Reyna saga, there's quite a bit there. All right, back to Wendy's words. Reyna told Jones that Oliphant was well aware of the direction of his investigation and offered to introduce him to notable leaders within the movement who could in turn introduce him to others and provide critical information. Oliphant said he was concerned about some runaway movement members who might have been involved in the Oklahoma City bombing and was willing to help Reyna root them out. No thanks to Cash, bad actors, and saboteurs within the Jones team, Reyna secured Oliphant's utmost assistance. Oliphant, who was now dying, took him around, introduced him to people in and outside the movement, and vouched for him, including the top dog, Louis Beam, who was not one of the runaways, and whom Oliphant had the utmost respect for, a mutual feeling between the two men. Nevertheless, the day before McVeigh's execution in 2001, the Arizona Republic asked, did Arizona militia leader and bomber, or did Arizona militia leader aid bomber? I read that wrong. It's a mystery, the answer to which former Arizona Patriots militia godfather Jack Oliphant took to his grave, as it would, it seemed, McVeigh. And then here's that picture of that very article itself they're referring to. Let's keep moving. After the Oklahoma City bombing, the FBI also looked into, or at least received information about some of the Arizona Patriots who'd been involved with Jack Oliphant in the 1980s and were investigated and arrested with him during Operation Clean Sweep. One was Jan Paulson, who'd been Jack's inside guy at a nearby casino and had agreed to provide armored car cash pickup services, although Jack became frustrated with him because of his lack of urgency about doing so. Here is some excerpt from some article, it appears. It says, Oliphant stated he and his group would fake an accident on the main road in an isolated area between Laughlin and Las Vegas, Nevada, by having two junker cars on fire shortly before the armored vehicle arrived. Oliphant advised that when the armored car stopped, Rick Jackson, who was staying with him, would use a radio jamming device so the individuals in the armored car could not transmit. Oliphant advised civils he would then inject sleeping gas into the armored car through a gun port that would put the occupants to sleep. Oliphant stated the armored car would then be winched up into an 18-wheeler truck and driven into the desert where it would be emptied and the drivers abandoned alive. Sounds like some Fast and Furious stuff. Oliphant again mentioned to civils that Pat Schlecht would be involved. Oliphant further stated that Jan Paulson, who resides in Bullhead City, Arizona, and works in Laughlin, Nevada as a car dealer, has agreed to conduct background information on the schedule of armored cars. Oliphant said Paulson would provide details to Oliphant, such as a time schedule, approximate amount of money collected each run, the car's route, number of employees in the car, and other information. Oliphant advised that if any highway patrol vehicles or other law enforcement vehicles happened upon the scene during the robbery, they would quickly be disposed of. 2 weeks after the Oklahoma City bombing, the Bullhead City PD provided the FBI with a file for Paulson, their most well-known constitutionalist, who was Jack's inside guy. So 2 weeks after the Oklahoma City bombing. Okay, let's read this. On this date, this is from the FBI, some sort of transcript of theirs. On this date, Captain John C. Crary, Bullhead City Police Department, 1255 Marina Boulevard, telephone 5. The telephone number doesn't matter. Provided a copy of the BHCPD arrest report for their most well-known constitutionalist, Jan Doyle Paulson, a white male, date of birth 8/15/41, and social security number redacted, just obtained, who allegedly has moved up to Golden Valley, Arizona, recently west of Kingman, Arizona. Captain Crary, who was assisted by Detective Steve E. Underwood, Detective Bureau, thereafter provided Special Agent Joseph Dushik of the Las Vegas Division of the FBI, working on the Kingman FBI command post in the Oklahoma City bombing, with the following reports. Okay, so this is just providing proof of such. All right, let's keep going. The file contained, among other things, a 1993 citation for the common freeman offense of failing to display a license plate. However, this time Paulson provided the officer with ID, which he failed to do several times back in the AP days. So this just is, I believe, a record of his arrest. So let me see. Yep. Yep. So this is just, providing a record of that. I don't think that one we need to read. Point being, there was more than one AP associate still kicking around the area during the time McVeigh was there. Here's more photos of the area. While still being a fugitive hiding out near Kingman, and around the time he was attempting to hook up with McVeigh, Stephen Colburn, alien implant fame, wrote in his diary about a conversation he had in a local bar with a man named Jan who didn't like the government, who gave him a phone number. Here's an excerpt. I believe this is from Aberration here. Going about Colburn. I think it's probably giving a little bit of background information on him. So here we go. The month before, November 94, in Needles, California, a town that sits directly nestled on the borders of Nevada, Arizona, and California, a local water authority official found a note nailed to a utility pole addressed to SC. It read in part, "A man with nothing left to lose is a very dangerous man, and his energy/anger can be focused toward a common righteous goal. I'm not looking for talkers, I'm looking for fighters." The letter, written in McVeigh's handwriting, was signed Tim T., which, for those who aren't aware, Tim Tuttle was his one of his known pseudonyms. The intended recipient of the letter, the man McVeigh said he was supposed to meet near Area 51, turned out to be a highly skilled chemist and federal fugitive named Stephen Garrett Colburn, the son of a U.S. Army Reserve Colonel and Department of Corrections dentist, was remembered by his former classmates and high school physics teacher in Oxnard, California, as a highly intelligent, nerdy loner who, even as a teenager, was obsessed with guns, snakes, chemistry, and bomb making. One high school friend recounted how Colburn, whom he had said had a hard time controlling his temper during their Dungeons and Dragons games, would often practice building and detonating ammonium nitrate bombs in the desert. After graduating high school in 1978, Colburn attended UCLA, where he studied chemistry. Dan Mock, name changed, told the FBI that he met Colburn in 1984 when they were both graduate students. Although they became friends, Mock began to suspect Colburn was stealing chemicals from the lab, including ammonium nitrate, and told his supervisor and other professors about it. They did nothing and even warned him to leave alone. Mock said Colburn was very anti-Semitic and believed Jews ran the world as part of a UN conspiracy. A man he worked with later said he was a Nazi. Colburn's uncle told the FBI that his nephew was a paranoid schizophrenic who was capable of participating in a bombing, and in fact, he had always worried that someday his nephew would end up being a mad bomber. Colburn used a number of aliases, including Bill Carsman and John Connor, latter referring to the protagonist of the 1984 movie The Terminator, who leads a fight against Skynet, an AI supercomputer bent on taking the world with cyborg minions. Colburn says Connor had close connections to the various remnants of the Arizona Patriots, as did Michael Fortier, a group of tax protesters who attracted notoriety in the mid-1980s after several members were arrested for criminal activities committed in the hopes of sparking a white supremacist revolution and overthrowing the government. I know Colburn is one of those characters who doesn't, this is my words obviously now, that doesn't tend to get a lot of shine when he came up. Even in our, I think we had to have mentioned him at least once or twice in my, in the series that I did, the Oklahoma City series I did with Richard, but I don't think he came up a lot. I will say I read Ham's book recently, and that does kind of contextualize Colburn a little bit more. Like, I knew before that definitely, you do get the impression, at least, from reading an Aberration, you get the impression that he had some sort of role in something to do with bomb making, whether it was helping, McVeigh or whatever. I don't know. And now I think when you read Mark Ham's book, In Bad Company? Yeah, In Bad Company, his whole multiple John Doe 2 theory. This is where you really kind of get like, oh, and this is where you get into the cell-based structure that is kind of speculated to be had by this group, and this is where you get into perhaps Colburn was maybe part of a bomb building cell, and that was the cell that was the role they filled. Whereas we had other cells, which would be like the cell with like Langan and Guthrie and McCarthy and, some of those other guys, which some of you guys may recognize those names. Those were like the money making part of the cell. These were the bank robbers and, were able to obtain funds for other stuff like the bomb makers. Anyways, so just so you can get a fuller picture of this Colburn character, he seems to have a pretty important role. All right, here's more. Here's another excerpt. It says, took off back to Bullhead and stopped at a gun shop, Smith's, and a hardware store to pick up supplies for a new project. Tried to call Billy Joe at Smith's, but they said she was out at a job interview or dodging my phone calls. Drove over toward Oatman and remembered that green rock Fred wanted, so I went out to the tunnel to get it and then went on to Oatman. Fred wasn't there, having just left to go to town to do some washing, so I went on into the Oatman hotel bar, ended up having a pleasant time talking to several people, got a phone number from a guy named Jan, who used to be a power company, power CO man? I don't know what it means by power company, perhaps, who didn't seem to like the government, worked a horseshoe puzzle with a gunfighter, hard to visualize how that works even after you've done it. Surprised that UI talked to me again after ignoring me before. Jumped into a conversation about the Second Amendment and the coming conflict. Said he has a group going to. Asked if I could join, but he seems they had enough members. Rats. Maybe working on him is promising if he seems friendly later on as well. Hope so, as I really need a secure place to stay soon. Fred finally came back, and I sold him that rock for $10. Said to call him back in a week after he finds out if it is suitable for display and sawing into sections. All right, let's keep moving. After talking to someone in the bar, possibly Jan, about gun rights and the coming conflict, Colburn was told about a local group, but when he was asked to join, he was rebuffed. Not the first anti-government group who put him off. So let's go ahead and read this. This is Oatman suspect known as survivalist. So this is by Yoon Kyung Kim from Stephen Colburn. This is Oatman, Stephen Colburn, chemist, survivalist, and weapons expert, dropped out of sight in this tiny town, washing dishes in a restaurant that caters to tourists who stop to watch wild burros that wander in from the desert. He attracted little attention except when he talked about the government. It wasn't so much what he said as how he said it, an acquaintance said Friday. He was really intense, said David Scott, who knew Colburn as a regular at the Oatman Hotel bar and took notice when he would complain about the government. We all bitch about stuff like that, but he seemed to have more zeal. Colburn, 35, whose last permanent address appears to be the Southern California coastal city of Oxnard, was wrestled to the ground on Main Street Friday after allegedly tried to pull a gun on federal agents. He was picked up on a search warrant stemming from a weapons charge unrelated to the Oklahoma City bombing, but a senior federal official in Washington told the Associated Press that investigators were looking at possible links to bombing suspect Timothy McVeigh. A U.S. Marshal's wanted poster describes Colburn as trained in survival skills and a chemist by trade. It says that he is 6'1", 195 pounds, with brown hair and green eyes, and that he also goes by the name Bill Carson. He's a backpacker, survivalist, loves automatic weapons, heavy weapons, said Gil Salazar, a bail bondsman, in Rancho Cucamonga in San Bernardino County, California, who had sought Colburn for skipping bail. Colburn was stopped for a traffic violation in July 94. An officer seized a knife, assault rifle, and a silencer, and 2 loaded handguns from his vehicle, said Richard Maxwell, Chief Deputy District Attorney for San Bernardino County. Earlier, authorities said they were searching for a man who may have driven a pickup alongside McVeigh's car immediately after the April 19th bombing. The official in Washington who spoke on condition of anonymity said the man was believed to drive a brown pickup that was recently spotted with a bag of ammonium nitrate fertilizer in the bed. The 4,800-pound bomb that ripped apart the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building was made of ammonium nitrate and fuel oil. However, a brown pickup linked to Colburn may not have been moved for some time, the official said. Colburn's arrest Friday riveted the town of 140 residents, known as the honeymoon spot for Clark Gable and Carol Lombard. The former gold mining town attracts mostly tourists these days who come to watch burros that come in from the desert and wander impeded down the main street lined with old West-style false front stores. Colburn worked at the Oatman Mining Company restaurant as a prep cook and dishwasher. He lived with 2 roommates in a white trailer on a hill on the edge of town. Late Friday, agents from the from the ATF were interviewing some of the roommates by the driveway littered with bits of scrap metal. Townspeople recounted what they saw of the arrest, and a handful of the white-muzzled burros strolled down the main street. The dramatic arrest began with a routine canvass, said Ted Tonioli, owner of the Oatman Hotel. Federal agents showed up with a photo. Tonioli's bartender identified as Colburn, and the agents left. I walk outside, and lo and behold, there he is. They signaled officers as Colburn bought a newspaper outside a store. Colburn pulled the .38 on them, and they wrestled him to the ground. One marshal was slightly hurt when he fell on the sidewalk. Just before his arrest, Colburn was shopping in an Indian jewelry store. Okay, so it's just kind of background on who he is. Obviously, that they were looking into him for the Oklahoma City bombing and the like. Another Arizona Patriot who surfaced in the Oklahoma City bombing investigation reports was Monte Ross, who as a troubled 22-year-old lived on Jack's ranch and was the group's designated bomb maker. He even invented an exploding arrow for Jack, although when attempting to demonstrate it to an undercover officer, the arrow failed to ignite. It's pretty fucking sick if he did come up with that. Within a year after being appointed to the esteemed position of group bomb maker, Ross blew up some of his fingers while doing just that. And while this did not deter him from continuing his role, it did force Jack to reschedule a planned armored car robbery. Here's a little excerpt here. It says on July 9th, 1986, Special Agent M.C. Comas traveled to Oliphant's ranch, where upon his arrival, he was told by Oliphant that Ross had just blown off his thumb and 2 fingers while making a pipe bomb. Comas was shown the explosion scene, and upon inspecting the scene, located several pieces of galvanized pipe stuck in nearby trees and a portion of what appeared to be a human thumb. Ross was featured in bomb-making instructional videos Jack made for distribution to other Christian identity groups, some of which were found during the raid of his property, along with, among other videos, the movies Red Dawn, Mad Max, and footage of a Bruce Springsteen concert. So yeah, this goes into different tapes that he had there. Doc and Skeeter home tape. Tape copies of Raiders of the Lost Ark, Star Trek TV. Tape labeled Lord of the Rings, determined to be a tape copy of a movie. So yeah, they have all these different, different taped movies there. During the clean sweep investigation, Ross's own mother took it upon herself to contact the FBI, telling them her son had a long history of atrocious behavior and was extremely dangerous. He'd recently told her about being involved with a radical group near Kingman whose purpose was to eliminate judges, political officials, blacks, Mexicans, and Jews. She agreed to cooperate with the FBI in their then ongoing investigation. Ross and Oliphant were later both convicted and sentenced to 4 years in prison for plotting to rob a Brinks armored truck. So here is a article on just that. So Patriots indicted an armored car plot. FBI points to mangled hand to illustrate its case. It says when Monte Dayton Ross raised his right hand to be sworn in, the missing thumb and parts of 2 other fingers were stark reminders of an alleged plot in which he was labeled the bomb maker. Ross's testimony at a bail hearing in U.S. District Court in Phoenix came as problems deepened for the defendants in the Arizona Patriots case Wednesday, with federal grand jury indictments charging 5 self-described patriots in connection with the alleged plot to rob an armored car to finance a survival camp for white supremacists. The wife of one of the defendants was indicted on charges of pointing a revolver at an FBI agent attempting to arrest her husband. U.S. Magistrate Morton Sitver ordered Ross and the 2 others held without bail, saying they might pose a danger to the public and might flee if released. In the first testimony by any of the defendants, Ross, 22, said that he had supported himself by trapping, hunting, and working at ranches. Ross lived in a tent about 35 miles east of Kingman, in arrangement with his court-appointed attorney. All right, blah, blah, blah. Then it goes off. Okay, so that just shows that happened. Ross's mother reached out to the FBI again after the Oklahoma City bombing early May 95, saying her son had been fingered by a one-armed man as someone involved in the bombing. She mentioned Ross was missing some fingers, and he had told her he was involved in a militia group in the Kingman area. She wasn't the only one who provided information about Ross. In mid-May 1995, the ATF talked to Kingman men who they were told looked like John Doe 2. The man who they noted did not resemble John Doe 2, told them that a man named Monte Ross had worked for him in 93. Ross, he said, had been arrested in the past for making bombs and had lost his hand doing so. The agents then went to the Mojave County Sheriff, who had a record on Ross, and gave them his last known address. On the way to the address, one of the ATF agents remembered that a man living at this same address was questioned about her knowledge of McVeigh. Upon arrival, the woman told the agents that she invited Ross for certain reasons, that he was associated with the Arizona Patriots, had been arrested with Oliphant, spelled Olfaunt in the report. She described Ross as very anti-government and militant and very dangerous. She continued, telling them that Ross was currently staying in the Hualapai Mountains with others. She even took the agents to the Patriot compound, where they were confronted by an angry man who demanded to know what they wanted. After being informed of their purpose there, the man said Ross worked for a trucking company in Phoenix and that he hadn't been home for about a month. I'm unaware of Ross's whereabouts in the lead up or on the day of the Oklahoma City bombing were ever investigated or established. Paulson and Ross are just 2 examples of Arizona Patriots who surfaced in the Oklahoma City bombing investigations. There were others, but you get the picture. The FBI even interviewed a man who had been involved with the Hallelujah Boys, an earlier incarnation of Jack Oliphant's group of militant men predating his involvement in the Arizona Patriots, which that is weird. That is one realm of research I would like to dig into one of these days. The Hallelujah Boys, which is Jack Oliphant's, from my understanding, a cult essentially. All right, let's read this article she attached here. It goes, on May 4th, 1985, the following investigation was conducted by Special Agent Redacted at Redacted, Minnesota. Redacted was contacted as residents. Redacted, telephone number, redacted, and provided the following information concerning his involvement with organizations that train with firearms in Arizona. Redacted advised that approximately redacted he belonged to an organization known as the Hallelujah Boys, who were based in Arizona. He described the members of this organization as religious fundamentalists, tribunalists, patriots, and survivalists. He further advised this organization trained extensively with firearms in the deserts of Arizona. If I remember correctly, too, I also think the Kehoe boys. I'm talking on my butt right now, so maybe this will come up later. But I think the Kehoe boys may have been, may have had something to do with the Hallelujah boys, era of Jack Oliphant, if I recall correctly. I may have to come back on that one, but don't quote me on that. If you guys find that, let me know if you're able to confirm that. But I'm pretty sure, because I know the Kehoes have always been some characters that I found particularly interesting. But anyways, that aside, all right, yeah, where was it? You described the members of, they trained extensively with firearms at Desert of Arizona. Redacted. He had heard that since he left the Hallelujah Boys, Redacted was arrested and now in prison. He was not aware as to the nature of the charges leading to Redacted's arrest. He did recall that Redacted had some formal military training, possibly with the Redacted. He said that he believes that the extreme faction of the resistance movement may be responsible for the bombing of the federal building in Oklahoma City. He further stated that he does not condone or believe in such acts of violence. He also advised that he is not a member of any militia or organization that advocates the violent overthrow of the government or acts of violence directed toward any government agency. He did state that he believes that the ATF and the FBI acted inappropriately on the Branch Davidian incident in Waco, Texas several years ago. He also stated that he and other individuals who share his attitudes and beliefs believe that the FBI is involved in a conspiracy with the Colombian drug cartels in the trafficking and distribution of cocaine. And holy shit, were they not correct in retrospect, huh? So we'll resume our chronological journey of McVeigh's time in Kingman, 93, in part 3B, looking for an army, which she'll post in an instant. We are about 50 minutes deep-ish into this. We'll go ahead and leave it as is, and we'll come back on the next episode with 3B. I think I'll probably just title these as 3A and 3B just to make it easier. But with that, guys, if you do want to support what I'm doing over here, you can leave a like, subscribe, comment. Those all go a long way. Like share as well. You can also leave a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify. It's helped a lot. You'd be surprised how rare it is for people to actually do that. So it goes a long ways. And those are all things you can do without chipping in a single buck. But if you do want to really, really make this show go, you can also follow on Twitter at Towering Jose. That's another step you can do. Help boost my Twitter profile. Also help keep me up to date on the going-ons of information from my coverage of what's going on in the world. Just tagging me and stuff. But if you want to directly support the show in the best way you really can, you can do that with money at patreon.com/NoWayJose2020. The lowest level is $2. That gives you access to early episodes. I do usually do about 1 to 2 of those a week, trying to keep about 4 behind the paywall at any given time. So you have weeks of content behind the paywall. I know we have 4 behind the paywall at this given time. So there's plenty for you guys to get into in there, so it's good value. You also get an ad-free RSS feed there, and also you can get a priority for the call-ins on me and Austin's weekly call-in show, which is Already Dead, which is on Tuesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. You also get access to the pre-show on there, so quite the value. Not doesn't cost a whole lot, only $2. But the highest level is my sponsors. I read them off every episode. It's a big thank you to them. I'm my co-host in Tower Gang at Tower Gang Toad, also at Brigade D's, at COVRCK, at _Infazil, and Tim Tuttle at John Klebold, and Will Bell's Delicious Blueberry Rabbit Eye Wine, the big fan of the show, Torme, and also Jordan Pearson. So go clean your room, fellas. And with that, guys, we are out of here. Bye-bye. See you again soon.